This is Ask a Couples Counsellor, a show that answers all the relationship questions you're too afraid to ask. On the show, we'll take your questions and give you the tools you need to build trust and intimacy with your partner. I'm your host, Neha Kapoor. I'm a registered clinical counsellor and psychotherapist, and I'm really passionate about helping couples navigate the challenges that we all go through. Because after all, every relationship encounters some stormy weather now and then. Welcome back to Ask the Couples Counsellor. Before we begin, I want to let you know that today's episode includes discussions about infidelity, grief, and the loss of a loved one in an accident. If these bring up difficult emotions for you, please take care of yourself first and either skip this episode or listen at a time that you feel ready. For confidentiality reasons, the name and voice of the individual featured in this episode have been altered. In our last episode, Petra shared the story of her fairy tale romance with Nathan, which eventually turned into a nightmare. She opened up about how they stayed in contact after their breakup and eventually reunited, only to discover that Nathan's actions didn't align with his words. This ultimately led her to uncover the painful truth. She wasn't the only woman in his life. Let's dive into her remarkable journey. So she knew who you were?
Yes.
Okay, and how did she know that?
Well, because he had told her about me.
Oh, right. So Nathan was talking about you to her.
Yeah.
And this was after the 5 years that you'd been together and you'd broken up, where you were still in the process of supporting each other through the breakup.
Yeah. And that's when I'd found out he'd actually been living with her for a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
So in that whole period after we had broken up and then we were both supporting each other and all that.
And talking to each other and together again, yes.
Together again, basically. Yeah, sleeping together, the whole lot. He was living with another woman.
Wow. And what was that like for you to discover that?
It was extremely painful.
And when we say painful, what do you mean?
I have never been betrayed like that in my life. I can't even explain the physical pain that I felt. The emotional, mental anguish that came after that was incredible as well. Everything that I thought I had known about this person turned out to be a lie. So now my reality was not real. I had no sense of reality.
And I suppose that's what infidelity can do to a person, right? Because essentially you thought that you were going to get back with this guy.
Correct.
And to find out that he was betraying you the whole time, A, causes post-traumatic stress in you, and B, it shatters your reality, right? And I saw you through that time. So what would you say was the most difficult part about that?
Trying to come to terms with the fact that I didn't know who Nathan truly was. It's like I had the experience of two different people, two strangers, worlds apart. I had the Nathan that, I had planned to build this life with, who, showered me with affection during this period of time and these promises and whatnot. And then I had a completely different Nathan standing in front of me, blatantly lying to my face and continuing to deny things.
And did you confront him?
Yeah.
And what was that like?
That was Hollywood movie category.
Tell us a bit about that Hollywood movie, because that was quite a scene, right?
I can get a bit theatrical. So after me and the woman he had been, living with had got into contact, we agreed to meet up, and I went to their home where they had been living together. And he was coming home that night, and she said, should I tell him that you're here? And I was like, definitely not. I said, you have a conversation with him and I'll just come out when I think it's the right time to come out. And so I hid in her son's room and I listened to him tell her how he ended things with me finally. So this seemed to be a running issue for them, where she was asking for the same things that I was asking him.
And what were those?
To stop contact with me, because clearly I have been a topic of conversation in this relationship, and to give her the full commitment. And then I just listened to him kind of lie about things. He was saying how, I was always reaching out to him and he only saw me as a friend and he doesn't see a future with me, and that was long gone. And basically kind of reversing everything he actually did say to me. Yeah, he denied that he had ever been sleeping with me, that he'd been seeing me, the whole lot. And that's when I walked out of the room and I just said, "Hello, Nathan." I said, "What a wonderful home you have here." And then all hell broke loose. It was catastrophic.
Were there screaming matches?
Yeah, definitely on my end. He was quite silent and just sitting in an armchair. And yeah, I was very angry. And then eventually it all kind of dissipated and we just sat there and I was like, great. I said, let's spill everything out, lay it all out. I said, you have nowhere to go. You're backed in a corner. So speak your truth. Even at that point, I just wanted the truth. I think I had already accepted that this is too far gone and I can never come back to this place again. That had already been shattered for me, but I still want to know the truth.
And what was the truth?
The truth was that, yes, you had been living with this person for 1.5 years, that you had promised this person a life together, that you were seeing both of us at the same time. And we're getting, these mixed stories. And I remember saying to him, I said, "Who do you love?" I said, "Who do you love here?" And he goes, "I love you both." I was like, fantastic. I said, "You're so generous. You have so much love to give that you can love 2 people at once." And then I said, "Well, who are you going to marry? Because you told me you're marrying me, but you told her you're marrying her." And I think at that point he realized that I was too far gone. And he's like, he didn't answer it directly at first. I said, "Maybe it's easier if I ask you who you're lying to." I said, "So who are you lying to?" And he goes, "You." I said, "Thank you." I said, "You've saved me from a lifetime of suffering." And she said to me, "That's a lie. Like, I found messages on his phone where he was shopping for engagement rings for you." And I was just like, this is getting too complex. And I just remember leaving and I said, "Never contact me again. And I don't want anything to do with you. If you see anyone of my friends or my family," I said, "you're to look the other way." I said, "If you see me, do not acknowledge me." I said, "I want nothing to do with you anymore." And I left at that point. And she had supposedly left, but I knew that wasn't going to last because I remember her calling me and asking if I had proof of messages that he had sent me where, he had promised me all these things. But at that point, I'd already deleted everything. And she stayed with him for another 2 years.
And this is where the story kind of gets more complicated, right?
Correct.
And now you're dealing with all this destruction that he's left behind and working through the intense amount of grief, pain, betrayal, loss, everything that you've gone through. How did you get through that on your own?
Again, I had no choice. It was sink or swim. Let's get back into that fight or flight mode. And that's not a very pleasant place to be at. You're constantly on edge. My body was reacting in ways. I wasn't sleeping well. I was constantly anxious. I didn't have the capacity to, focus on what I was eating or to exercise regularly. I couldn't hide it from my friends and my family because I was so distraught that I had to then speak about these things. And there was just all this shame. I felt so ashamed of myself because how could I let this happen to me?
Why do you think shame had a factor to play in this?
Because I'm responsible for myself and I had let myself down. And, there's people hold perspectives and opinions of you, and you hold kind of perspectives and opinions of yourself. And I always considered myself to be an intelligent, smart, strong woman. And here I am in a position where I am the polar opposite of that.
And you felt played. And how are you to know that, right?
Yeah, I felt outsmarted and an idiot. And how could I be so stupid to have not known that this was going on behind my back?
How were you to know?
Someone would have told me divine intervention.
Exactly, right? Where he's telling you a story, he's obviously telling her a story. How are you to know?
Yeah. There was no way of knowing. And this is something that I never understood as well. Like I used to be quite judgmental of people who, were victims of some sort of infidelity. And I always used to be like, how couldn't you know? But my God, you couldn't know. He did it so well.
Exactly.
He had the time to do it so well. People like, how didn't you know? I was like, well, firstly, I said, let's have a look at the fact that we're in COVID. And I was trying to keep this under wraps from my family because I didn't want to start jumping into things too soon. So I wasn't openly inviting him into my house where he was interacting with my family. And any moments that I did have, they were very much in secrecy. And he was readily available to me. And the phone calls, like the amount of phone calls that we'd have, like the time that he had invested into me made it seem impossible for him to have time for anyone else.
And isn't that interesting that we don't think in that direction if somebody is giving us a lot of attention, right? And there's no way of knowing. And so you've gotten to this point, you found this out, and I know that was an incredibly hard year for you. We got through it, you got through it, and time went on. And he was in the shadows here and there. You were still processing your grief around everything that had happened and the hurt and the pain that he'd caused. And then what happened?
We got into contact again.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, a good year had passed of no contact. And the instances where he was present at the same events that I was present at, I held my ground firmly and I didn't interact with him. He tried, but I just kept my walls up. And yeah, we were at another event together and he was quite adamant on talking. And I think at this point, so much time had passed that I knew that I wasn't going to fall back into this.
But you were still struggling with the emotions that surrounded him, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'd reach a point where I stopped blaming myself for what had happened. And I also, in a sense, stopped blaming him in the sense that I recognized that here is a man that is a hurting man, that is a damaged man, and he isn't that because of me, or I didn't create that. I don't even know how I worded it to you once. I think I said something like, I realized that he's a hurt and damaged person, and hurt people do hurt people.
Mm. And what made you realize that he was damaged?
Because he never changed and he just kept getting worse.
Worse mentally, worse?
Mentally.
Okay.
Like people would always come and tell me things if they'd seen him somewhere or if they ran into him.
What would they say?
People would say that, he's not doing well and, he's acting out irrationally. And
was he drinking? Was he taking drugs?
He was drinking. I heard that he was taking drugs as well at this point. It just put me in a position where I felt pity would be the right word. But I was able to kind of hold a bit of compassion towards him. Like, this is a really sad way to live your life. And I could see that he was trying to, escape himself.
So was your focus then, would you say, shifting from blaming him to having compassion for him?
Yeah, definitely. That was very hard, but that didn't come easy. That took a lot of... I didn't want to be angry at him anymore.
And why do you think that is?
Because it consumes me.
Mm.
I don't like that feeling. I was tired of holding a grudge against someone. I think I just got to a point where I was like, okay, this happened to me and it was horrible. I've survived it, but it has no place in my life anymore. And I want to move on from this and I want to be a better person because of this. And I won't become that person if I'm holding on to this resentment.
And I suppose you were just kind of at the precipice of getting there. And then your story has another turn to it, right? It doesn't end.
No, and I truly did feel like I was at that precipice, hey?
Mm-hmm.
I had finally gotten to a point where we had spoken and we really covered a lot of ground with one another, where I got to speak what was on my mind about everything and he got to kind of speak his truth about everything. Enough time had passed where my emotions were removed from it, where I wasn't heightened in emotion, that we could talk about things level-headed and clearly. And I suppose I found a lot of closure in these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then he passed away.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
It's so strange.
How does that even happen? And how does someone mourn somebody who's hurt them? It's such a complicated thing to talk about, and it's rarely discussed process. So how did you find strength in such adversity? And how did he pass?
He passed away tragically in a car accident. I didn't fully comprehend it. And that's what I mean when I say it's been strange. And to an extent, I still don't comprehend it. I think how do I handle it is that I'm grateful that I was able to have those conversations with him where we genuinely did have nice conversations with each other and where I was able to find that closure. I think this whole experience would be very different for me if I hadn't had that opportunity.
Yes, and I suppose he did call you, right, before he passed, tragically.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't that long before.
No. And that was the final goodbye. For real this time.
What did he say?
He was extremely apologetic once again for ever, not being the man that I needed, and how he wished he had my strength and that how proud he is of the woman that I've become. And he's sorry that he had to contribute to me becoming such a woman in such adverse ways, and that he'll always love me, and he just hopes that I stay happy and that everything good comes my way. And I wish the same thing for him.
And that really felt like a final goodbye?
Yeah. I felt very ready to step away from that. It just felt right in my body. It aligned with what I wanted to do. And I was hoping, yet again, that, maybe one day I would hear that he's made it for himself. That's where that conversation left off. I was really thinking that maybe one day we'll see each other again and everything will be fine for him. Not together. I didn't want to be with him, but, that he would be happy and live a peaceful life.
But you never thought peaceful would mean death?
No, definitely not.
So that process, as shocking as it is, how has this whole experience shaped the way that you view life and relationships?
It's very cliche, but life truly is too short, and there is no time to hold any grudges or resentment, and just to speak when you need to speak in a relationship, and to not hold on to the things that don't serve you, and that if you do have someone that's important to you in your life, to really cherish them and to continue making the effort for one another, because that could all be gone so quickly and you wouldn't even see it coming. It's very unpredictable, life.
Life is transient, right? It's fragile, it's transient, it's fleeting. It's here in this moment. And that's really all you've got. So what advice would you give to someone who might be feeling stuck in a similar situation?
I think just have those difficult conversations with yourself. Ask yourself what it is that you want and if those needs are being met. And if they're not being met, have the courage to say, I deserve more for myself, and step away from that. I truly do believe that there is good out there. Despite everything, I think there is good. And despite everything that I went through, I still believe that there was goodness in him. It just wasn't good for me. But to step away from the things that don't serve you and get help. Like, there's nothing wrong with reaching out for help from a professional.
And do you think that you've truly forgiven him?
I think now with his passing, especially, I feel like I've had no other option.
Why is that?
Because I wanted to give him peace, even in life after death. And if I was still harboring these feelings towards him of resentment and all that, then I suppose in a sense I worried that he wouldn't have that peace that I so desperately wanted him to have. But I do feel like I released him of that anyway when he was still alive, and through our conversations I told him that I forgave him for everything. And
so you feel at peace with it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's making, as complex as this all is, it's making it a lot easier for me.
So if you could talk to the person that you were at the start of this story, What would you say to her?
What would I say to her? I suppose you know what? A massive one I always go back to, and I still have these conversations with myself now whenever I find myself trapped in an old way of thinking, is that, you have nothing to be ashamed of, and trust yourself to make your own decisions and your own conclusions.
How does one trust themselves, Petra?
I think for me was, firstly, I think in a small way, was making decisions without asking for anyone else's opinion on them. Just kind of backing yourself in saying, even if this doesn't work out the way I want it to work out, I'll pick myself up. Like, I've got your back.
Do you think it's also trusting your gut?
Oh, 100%. Do not ignore that. Yeah, I definitely have become over the years far more in tune with my intuition. And I'm trying not to ignore when I get these feelings about things. Like, for example, I just knew that I had to leave a job because I had a pull to go and find a job elsewhere. I found myself getting quite excited about that, about the idea of getting a job somewhere else. And it's been the best decision I ever made. I didn't think twice. Handed in my resignation, applied for a new role and got it. And I've been happy. In matters of the heart, I remember at one point after Nathan, I'd been seeing someone else and I was feeling super anxious about this person. And lo and behold, it truly was a sign from my gut telling me that this wasn't right for me. And then there were instances where I was very calm, almost bored with others. And that was a sign that it was fine. You know what I mean? This is a healthy place for you to be, or this person is quite good for you. And as soon as that kind of emotion shifted perhaps to a little bit of anxiousness or discomfort, I knew that it was time to step away from that. So yeah, definitely trust your gut, trust your intuition, and trust that you know what's best for yourself. If you just stop in those motions of high emotion, just take a moment and sit yourself down and the answers will come to you.
So allow for the answers to come to you rather than chasing them.
Yeah, and that might take a couple of days. That might take a week. And you know how long it takes me to make a decision about things. But if one thing I don't regret is taking the time I need to make a decision for myself. And it's becoming quicker and quicker these days.
And how do you think therapy has changed the way that you see yourself, not just in relationships, but as an individual?
Therapy has allowed me to see myself as a human with flaws, and that's okay.
Because we're all a bit raw and messy, right?
Yeah, and therapy has allowed me to see myself as a complex individual rather than a streamlined one. And what I mean by that is that I can experience a range of emotions, or I can have a duality in my experiences. It's not just one straight line. And I think I've said this to you a few times, it's wavy.
Are you comfortable in the waves now?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because I know for a long time you weren't as comfortable.
No, I just wanted to go straight and narrow.
So that's definitely changed over the years?
Yeah, definitely. And it just makes it easier for you to process things. I think once you start accepting that you have flaws and that you're not this perfect person, and that you don't expect others to be perfect, why would you expect that of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It becomes far more easier to navigate through any kind of challenging situations or challenging emotions. Sometimes emotions, strange or complex emotions, arise in moments where you're relative peace.
Lastly, I want to ask you, do you think that you can truly move on now and that you're truly free of all the baggage?
No.
No, because we never are.
Yeah, I'm going to say no. I do think that I will move on. I think I just need time to heal some more.
And what do you think that healing is for you now? Because it's been different at different stages.
Healing for me now is making sure that I'm giving to myself. When I say giving to myself, it's being consistent with the gym, with my eating, making sure that I'm giving the energy to the right people and people that give me energy back, where it's reciprocal, and stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit, trying new things. That's healing for me. It's like I'm coming back to a core, but I do think that I have I'll heal even more in my next relationship, because that's bound to bring something up for me.
Especially after everything that you've been through.
Yeah. And in a sense, that is a little bit daunting for sure. But I think I have the tools or the skills or the capacity to handle them. And that's all come through the therapy that I've received under your guidance as well. And I also know that I can always come to your space.
Of course.
So
I'm always here for you, right?
It doesn't matter, because I can just come here.
My doors
Worst
are always
case.
open. Look, Petra, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on this show today. Your story is just truly inspiring, and I'm so grateful that you've shared it with us. And for those of you listening, I hope that this episode reminded you of your own strength and capacity to grow through life's challenges. If you found this conversation valuable, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, take care and keep showing up for yourself and your relationships. You've been listening to Ask a Couples Counselor, a show that answers all the relationship questions you're too afraid to ask. This show is produced by novoempowercounselling. We provide a range of services, including couples counselling, individual counselling, and online counselling. To find out more, visit our website novoempowercounselling.com.au. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. To make sure you don't miss an episode of Ask a Couples Counselor, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, I'd love it if you could leave me a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm your host, Neha Kapoor, and I'll see you in the next episode.